First, let me thank the Minister for a wonderful lecture. If I may say so myself, that was a very good history lecture you gave. You not only took us backwards, but you were looking forward as well. And it was a very comprehensive sweep of our education system, of how we've evolved, and you've signaled the key shifts in our system and what are the things we need to do looking forward. I won't attempt to summarize your lecture, but what I'll try to do is to highlight, I think, three, at least for me, three key takeaways from this very important lecture. The first is that Singapore's current education system, as opposed to landscape, which the Minister qualified, is the outcome of decades of consistent and clear vision, bold plans in execution, and pragmatic handling of trade-offs. So that's the first takeaway I had. It was not something that was done ad hoc. It was systematic, it was thought through, and it was based on a vision. From the 1960s, it was clear that education will be a fundamental criteria, enabler for nation building and economic development. Without an integrated and coherent system, we will not be able to unite a disparate immigrant population, and without having an educated and adequately skilled workforce, Singapore will not have the human capital to develop and grow economically. But having a vision is useless unless you can deliver the outcomes. And here's where Singapore has systematically and consistently built capacity from physical infrastructure, one school a month in the 70s, to a high-quality teaching force. And third, there's always, as the Minister said, the need to manage trade-offs, because no policy is ever perfect, and policy shifts. So the need to move from customization to optimization of outcomes, language policy, streamings, these were all trade-offs that were adroitly handled during this period to enable good outcomes. So that was the first point. The second takeaway is that there's constant and regular adaptation. In other words, we didn't get a system right from the word go, and when circumstances and conditions change, there had to be adaptations. And there was that ability and even the boldness to accept that something's not working quite right, we need to change. So from massification, where you had to provide education for everybody, to moving away from a one-size-fits-all approach to customization, and then from customization to preparing students with different skill sets to succeed, and then the need to meet the challenges thrown up by 21st century challenges and opportunities as well as difficulties. So these were constant adaptation. And a third, and I thought was the most interesting, was that the effort to get our education system right is always a work in progress. And I thought that the title was very well chosen. This was from foundation to frontiers. There's no destination. Frontiers shift. And frontiers shift depending on circumstances, and new challenges will emerge. So as the Minister said, there will be always challenges as we move forward, and I think it's up to, I guess, new generations of teachers to take us through this VUCA world. Now they call it the BANI world, B-A-N-I. You all know what this is, right? You can Google it. But he ended his lecture by advocating that the skill sets for the future may not be based on what we have mastered in the past. The ability to create new value propositions to solve tomorrow's problems, the ability to connect and build bridges, and then the ability to appreciate and work with a diversity of strengths. So those were the key takeaways, at least for me, from this very comprehensive and insightful lecture. So now I want to start by posing questions to the panelists. I'll let the Minister rest for a little bit. I'll ask Woon Chia and Elmie to start with. So Woon Chia, let me begin with you, because Minister mentioned life cycle learning, lifelong learning, several times in his lecture. And he also said that to embody lifelong learning, we need to inspire the same commitment in our students. We need to inspire the commitment in our students, right? So teachers are at the forefront of this. So my question to you as Director NIE is, how do we get teachers to instill that kind of attitude and attribute in students as lifelong learners, or to become lifelong learners?
Okay, maybe to start off, I have to say that, whatever you try to inspire your students, you have to ask yourself whether you believe in it first. Our beliefs, our assumption will determine what we say and do. So whether it's lifelong learning, whether it's a broader definition of success, if you truly believe in it, then what you do and say would be very different. If you go to class and you tell your students, okay class, whatever I'm going to teach you today is very important because it's going to come out in your exam, then obviously you are not encouraging learning. You are focusing on grades. So of course, one of the most important thing is after you check your assumptions, you yourself must be someone who believes that learning goes beyond the classroom, learning goes beyond getting your certification. So when you have that, then in your communication with your students, that is what you would then encourage. It is not completing a task. It is not passing a test, getting the next certificate. It is learning for self-growth. It is making sure that you improve every time you read that little bit more. It's a very small step, but it's very important in how you frame your lessons. Thank you.
No, I have something to add to what Woon Chia mentioned. I think for those of you who have met me in your schools or even in the work plan, I always set this one very simple target to all educators. We say we challenge, we ask ourselves, what have we learned new in the last 1 year? Last 2 work plans ago, I think we had this saying, every teacher, every educator learn one new thing a year. And not only just to learn it for yourself, but to share it with your colleagues. And every school, one good idea a year. Why? Because I have 350 schools. So if every school give me one good idea, we have more than enough good ideas to implement across. And I think this is what Woon Chia and I think we firmly believe in. It's not what we say, but what we do. When our students see us learning, even as adults, they will be inspired to learn. So that's why whenever I go to the schools, I always start off with the introduction and I ask the teachers, tell me something interesting about yourself. It's not the icebreaker, because from there you will be able to appreciate whether the teachers, they themselves have found the joy of learning. Without the joy of learning, we cannot have the joy of teaching. It is only when we have the joy of learning that we can have the joy of teaching, and that will be more inspiring to our students than anything that we can tell them.
I'll come back to lifelong learning a bit later. There might be questions from the floor later on relating to this, but I'm going to move to technology because the Minister mentioned technology also a few times. And he said that if our people can adapt and make the most of technology, we will punch above our weight. But if we fail to ride this wave, we risk getting leapfrogged by other countries and we will be left behind. So technology generically. But what about technology in education? So I'm going to turn to Elmie and ask if he sees technology as a game changer, and can AI replace the teacher, for instance? What are your thoughts?
Thank you, Tai Yong. That's a very easy question. I'm just joking. So technology as a game changer. I believe technology has already changed the game. I would just like to share 2 examples of how technology itself has changed the game. So when we talk about EdTech, right, we are talking about EdTech broadly in terms of the hardware, the software, the applications, as well as the pedagogical instruments or theories or methods that we use to apply to this technology, the hardware and software to implement teaching. So there are 2 examples in my mind on how technology has already changed the game. A very recent example was during COVID-19. So during COVID-19, right, where we faced the possibility of having a lockdown, right? And during the lockdown, right, the possibility of a lockdown is that education, learning will be disrupted. For how long, we would not know. But we need to quarantine, we need to keep people at bay, we need to keep people away from schools, but at the same time, we need to keep their education going. Because otherwise, we have years of students moving ahead, fast down the road with 1 or 2 years, or maybe 1 or 2 semesters, we do not know how, of losing their educational potential opportunity. Then the Ministry of Education had this home-based learning. So we found, or at least I had experienced for myself, where technologies are being implemented nationwide into the homes of children and parents. That was when for me myself, I had 4 daughters. So 3 of them were in primary 6 PSLE, primary 5 and primary 3. And our home became a school. Our home became an operation center every morning during COVID-19. That's when we realized, or at least from what my realization is that technology has enabled education to permeate not only from the schools, but to the homes, and the responsibility of parents as educators, as teachers then come into the foreplay. I'm not so sure how it's going to be in the future, and as educators myself, the need to pivot from physical lessons and to pick up the tools fast and quick in order to continue education we have done it, and it is here to stay, and we can always do education in one way or another to supplement our teaching in schools. So in that aspect, I believe education or technology has changed the way we teach and the way we learn, and how parents also or homes have a part to play in educating our children. Another aspect in which I feel that technology has changed is that, I don't know, Minister, but it's very surprising whenever, I'm not so sure about the primary school or secondary school per se, but I watched this show last month with my kids, I Not Stupid 3, and it kind of reflects, I'm not so sure whether you've seen it, kind of reflects what I'm also experiencing in university, is that can we take the assumption that our students or the learners of today will have access to technology in that when they create their essays or when they solve problems, right, they are already consulting the use of AI and technologies before we even discuss them or before we even solve problems? Can we take it as a given that, every student or every learner will know how to use ChatGPT, for example? Apparently, when we do this in classes, right, in universities, I will get easily 90% saying that their first draft are through AIs. I'm not so sure, maybe in primary school, maybe in secondary school, we already have students already using first draft with these technologies as first draft to their learning, and then we are now focused more on scaffolding. So, back to the question, is technology changing, right? I think these are potentials that once we unlock, there's really no way to actually go back. Once a student actually, or a learner or a teacher actually started to use such technologies, right, there's really no way of them not using, because it's easy, it's already been adopted, it can be used continuously for learning, and the same goes to all the e-learning platform and the edtechs. So once it's unlocked, it's here to stay in one way or another. Yeah.
Woon, I'm going to turn to you because, I'm sure you have a view about whether technology is a good master or a good servant, and how to deploy it correctly.
Yeah, there are a couple of points that I want to share. I think we have no doubt that technology is a game changer. It can be a capacity multiplier. It breaks down barrier. It allows our classroom to be borderless. But there are 2 things that I think I want to share with our student teachers. The first is, do not use technology for technology's sake. If you do use technology, ask yourself, what's the learning objectives? Does it best help me to help my students learn? So ask yourself that question. The second thing that I want to highlight is, do not use technology just to substitute what you can do. Because in that way, you are not deepening learning. So when you use technology, make sure that technology helps you to make thinking visible. It helps you to have the big data set to understand students' learning a little bit more. It allows you to look at students' discussion now visually, because words can be captured, and then you would know what they are discussing. So technology should be used to transform learning, not just to substitute what a teacher does face-to-face.
If I may add, I think technology has changed many things, but I would also say that there will be some things that technology will not change. And I would also say that today, what we are seeing in terms of the application of technology to education is but perhaps the tip of an iceberg. Let me explain that. First, as Woon has said in the intro, teaching is not just about a didactic transmission of content and knowledge. In fact, before we start teaching, we have to establish a relationship with the students. And it is not a surprise that from what we have seen in our experience using technology can be summarized in this very simple phrase. For high ability students, they will adapt to technology like a fish to water. But for high needs students, we shouldn't start with high tech, but we should start with high touch. We need to first establish that relationship between a teacher and a student before you even talk about the content. So that's the first point I hope teachers to be will remember. Don't do technology for technology's sake, but that relationship building is very important. The second thing that I would say is that we can have all the technologies in the world, but technology is unlikely to be able to help us transmit values. It's unlikely to help us to discern with values. And that is where the human teacher is so important. To understand the respective needs of the student and to apply technology judiciously. So I think these are some fundamentals. Now, having said that, why I say that today technology, we have just perhaps used technology, or we are just at the tip of the iceberg. For example, today, the best teaching resources is not limited to what can be found in Singapore or even in our SLS. In fact, some of the most wonderful teaching pedagogies can be found across the world. We have access to such teaching materials just as anybody else in the world with the access to the internet can also similarly access to such quality resources. You look at larger countries like China, Indonesia, India, how they have used technology to overcome their lack of quality resources in the past and to rapidly scale up quality education to the far-flung corners of their respective countries. There is much that we can learn from them, and we should be humble to know that no matter how good our pedagogical practices are, there are still things that can be made available to us. But to me, the biggest potential for technology is for us to be able to reach the holy grail of what we call the effective class size of 1, where you can use technology and data science and apply the teaching according to the respective needs of the students. I always like to quote this example from Singapore Poly. Many of you have heard this in the front few rows. In Singapore Poly, way before COVID-19, they had a vision to get rid of class lectures. They wanted to put all their teaching resources online. That's not just to save time and space or to allow their students a different time to access the material. But over time, they have found out something very interesting. From how the students access and respond to the teaching materials, they can customize their back-in-class lessons according to the specific needs of the students. If the student watched the video at twice the speed, chances are that the student finds the lecture boring and has mastered it. If the student watched the video at half the speed and keep rewinding, chances are that they may not understand and we have to improve our teaching resources. When they come back, they roughly know which student need what sort of intervention, and they can focus the intervention according to the needs of the students. And they can then focus the time on relationship building, building teams to overcome challenges, as contrast with the past where they're just doing a more didactic transmission of knowledge. Today, every teacher should go into the classroom on the assumption that many of your students may know as much, if not more than you, in certain subjects. And your job is to facilitate discovery of new knowledge, new perspectives. Now, having said that, we are now only at the tip of the iceberg because today we have already tools to allow our teachers to use, to apply them, to teach the student according to different levels. You can do your math, you can do your English reading according to your level. You can mass customize whereby it's like playing a game, we call it gamification, it's like playing a game whereby you play to your respective level, and then you're just trying to surpass yourself rather than surpassing others. So I think there's tremendous opportunities for us to experiment, to figure out where we can use technology appropriately for what type of subjects, for what type of needs. But please do not think that technology is a one-size-fits-all. It gives us more tools in our tools box, but we must still ultimately master the tools and use it intelligently. And my last comment on technology is that a lot of focus has been on how to apply technology to our schools. Actually, I find the most interesting and really the blue ocean area is how do we apply AI and these new gamification technologies to the learning of our adults, where the same content delivered to a 25-year-old, 35-year-old, 45-year-old, 65-year-old can all be customized. This is our greatest need, but this is also the greatest gap worldwide in the research on how adults learn. That is why I have charged IAL, the Institute of Adult Learning, to, if you like, be the third leg of our triumvirate NIE, NIEC for schools and preschool, and now we need IAL to be for the adult learning. If we can get this right, then we truly have applied technology across the entire life cycle of our learning journey.
Minister, if I could just pursue the point you made earlier about class size of 1. So one of the hot topics around debates is, where people debate is the class size. And you mentioned that by OEC standards, our class sizes are actually, a ratio of students to teachers actually quite okay. But with technology, could you actually then use it to even lower the ratio even further? Instead of 20 to 1, 8 or something like that, using technology to take away some of the physical strains on teachers?
This is an evergreen topic in MOE, and it involves deep research. And I today will just briefly share with you where we are now, where we want to go. But actually, when people talk about class size, sometimes they use it interchangeably on two sets of quite different issues. One is physically, how many students are there in a class? There's one called the class size. Another group of people may use the class size as a proxy of the workload of our teachers. And that's quite different. Okay, you can have smaller class size, but your workload may still be the same, right? For example, in one country that we know, they have the same ratio as us. They have smaller class sizes, but their teachers teach more classes. Because you can't change the average, right? If the average mathematically is so, if you have smaller class sizes, means you have more classes, right? So that's one. So that doesn't really alleviate the workload, right? That just means you divide the class into two, you may go back to the morning and afternoon sessions. But that's not the solution to our problem or challenge, right? So that's not what it is. Then there are people who say that, why is it that the workload is so high? So I actually asked MOE to make an in-depth study. Number one, is our curriculum tougher than other people? What do you all think? Yes. You see, for all of us here, we would all like to think that our curriculum is harder than other people. But according to my CPTD professional colleagues, actually when we benchmark with others, we are not teaching more than other people. Then comes the more interesting question. If we are not teaching more than other people, why is it that we feel so stressed? Then it becomes an interesting conversation. Then we realize something. While we teach the same amount of subjects, there are a few factors that are different. Actually, our teaching curriculum time is more compact compared to other people. And that's because in the 40 weeks that we have typically in our school, about 6 weeks are committed to non-academic subjects, from your camps to your 21cc and many other things. And across the world, actually, we are one of the systems that commit such a high proportion of our curriculum time, if you like, to non-academic subjects. It's quite interesting. So we are more compact. There's a second reason for that. The second reason why we feel that we are so stressed is because actually our students are very high achieving. Today, compared to the past, our students are not satisfied with just a pass. In fact, they are trying to excel and go after the last point. There's both good and bad. If you do it as a pursuit of excellence in context, fine. But if you are just doing this without context, then it's a negative. Then you have to make a judgment as to whether you could learn more things without having to chase the last mark. Now, that is an important mindset and cultural shift. Now, come back to the issue of the physical class size. So, actually, what can we do? My hypothesis is this. If you can't change the average, and you want to lower the class size for some, you must increase the class size for others. You bend the curve. Do we do this? Actually, we have already done this. For many of the teachers in the school, you will know that today we have no standard class sizes. Depending on the needs of the students, you have pull-out classes and some learning support programs where you have one teacher to a few students. But on the other hand, you have also bigger class sizes. And where are the bigger class sizes? The bigger class sizes comes from the self-initiated learning, the technology-enabled learning. So if you can't change the average, then you must bend the curve, where some classes become smaller and some classes allowing the more matured students to do self-initiated learning and to use technology to scale up. That's why, to me, technology can break that trilemma. If we can use more technology to scale the class sizes according to the needs of the respective students, then we will move away from this debate about what is the physical class size. And that is our holy grail. Last but not least, I should address this question. Then many people will say that, why don't we just employ more teachers? Right? Yeah. I will go to MOF and ask for more budget, right? Actually, I must say that my Minister for Finance has been very kind to MOE all these years. Actually, for us, it's not an issue of resources. The issue is one of quality. In any society, if you want a certain quality bar, there's only so many people of that quality bar that you can. And in Singapore, since the 1990s, we have been very fortunate that we have maintained the quality bar where all our teachers come from the top 1/3 of our cohort. Last year, during the recruitment exercise, Wan Yong, Pemsek, and Wei Li and Chun Ki Liao, we told them, go all out, see how many we can recruit without compromising the quality bar. And the reality is not so easy. Beyond a certain point, if the quality bar suffers, we may create another set of problems, right? We may create another set of problems, and we should be very careful. But having said that, are we challenging ourselves to bring in more teachers from different backgrounds? The answer is certainly yes. I can think of a few. For example, today many people would like to try different things in different stages of life. Can we bring in more mid-career people to complement our teaching workforce? Today, 1 in 10 of our teachers come from the mid-career recruitment. The answer is certainly yes. But if we want to bring in more mid-career with different experiences to complement our teaching capacities, then we will have to review our own system from how NIE induct them into the teaching service to how MOE deploys them in the teaching service in order to make it more attractive for them. On the other hand, today, many more people will like flexi work, flexi hours, and so forth, right? Because different people have different needs in different seasons of life. And we are prepared to make adjustments also to accommodate to the different needs of the different educators in different seasons of life. But having said that, for those, again, in the front row, they will know what I always say. You can have flexi time, you can have flexi work, you can have flexi place, but we must share the same ethos. Because when the student come up to us, nobody will ask you, teacher, are you on flexi adjunct? Can I ask you this? Nobody will ask you that. All teachers, regardless whether you flexi or contract or you are full-time, must share the same ethos. And it is this ethos that allows us to achieve what we have today. It is a hard-won ethos built over the years that we will not want to give up. So are there ways for us to reduce the load of the teachers? Yes, there are many ways for us to do that, but we must be clear where we are and what are the options that we have. It is not realistic to think that we can just double capacity without compromising quality. It is also not correct to think that we can just cut the class size in half, ask all our teachers to do double the shift, and that reduces the thing. It's not. Actually, I like to summarize this with one teacher who was quite perceptive when I talked to them in one of my many schools visit. Ultimately, it's not the physical class size that matters to the teacher. You know what he told me? What matters most to him? What matters most to him is not how many people is in front of him in that class. It's actually he wants to know how many children is he responsible for to build that relationship in the school. It means how many people, because he may not be in the class, but he's still, nevertheless, responsible for the relationship building, and that is important to him. And today, compared to the previous generation of educators, we have been able to gradually reduce the ratio, and that is a tremendous help. But can we organize our work better? Certainly. Can we offload some of the admin duties? Certainly. But I want to say one thing finally for all our teachers here. I don't think it is the amount of work that bothers our teachers most. It is the impact of the work. I always say that I've never met a lazy teacher, but I've always met teachers who want to spend their time impactfully doing the most they can for the students. And that is what MOE is committed to do. Enabling you to spend your most precious time on the students, and we try to automate and do the rest of the admin with machines and other ways to help you alleviate the workload. But that relationship building is very important, and we are not about to compromise the quality of our teachers just by expanding. We need to maintain a certain quality bar in order to make sure that we inspire confidence in the system.
Thank you, Minister, for the very elaborate answer. I realize that we've got about 40 minutes left for the session, so I'm going to now open the Q&A to the floor and invite questions from our audience. I'm sure you, having heard the Minister and our panelists, you have questions. So please come to the mic. I don't have a pigeonhole or a Slido, so you can't send questions to me. I don't even have an iPad. So you have to go to the mic and ask your questions. Can we have the first questions? Yes, I see a gentleman. The mic's in front. A brief introduction of yourself and then pose your question to whoever you want to answer your question.
Good evening. Good evening, Minister. My name is Timothy. Okay. My question is regarding the tuition industry in Singapore. So the tuition industry in Singapore is rapidly evolving, with the market becoming rather saturated, and there's an increasing number of professionals offering this concept of bespoke tuition, premium tuition, and they charge fees that are quite high actually, and some of them even bring students out for field trips, and where the world essentially becomes their school. Hence, my question is, what does the government plan to ensure equitable access to quality out-of-school education for all students, regardless of their financial background? And Minister Chan, if you could change the tuition industry, what's one thing you could change about it? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Timothy. You must know that this is one of my bugbears, right? Okay, let's be very honest with ourselves. Since time immemorial, well-endowed families will always want to give the best to their children. It's like that in history. It's like that in Singapore now, across Asia. It's just the natural order of things. So, first comment. Can we stop tuition? I think realistically, some countries have tried, but didn't get very far. In fact, some countries who tried made it worse because it went underground, and the people who needed help didn't get help, but those who don't need help got help. Right? You know what I mean? The more well-off one. So this is the first problem. Then the second thing that we must do is this. Given that this is a dynamic across history and across time, across places, in Singapore, we must always make sure that everyone in Singapore, regardless of the background, can have access to quality opportunities. It may not be the same, it may not be entirely possible to be the same for everyone, but certainly, even the child from a single parent family, the child from someone who is working as a hawker, the child of a professional, when they come to our school must take care of everyone regardless of their background. That is what distinguishes MOE teachers from tuition teachers. MOE teachers do not choose the students that we teach. What worries me most about the tuition industry is not that it's just a tuition industry. What worries me most about the tuition industry is that there are some black sheep there that gives a bad name to the entire education sector. Why do I say that? Because imagine this. If you run a tuition center and you pre-select your students, then what value add are you doing for the students? I get very perturbed when I see advertisement that if you consume this product, you will get 4 A1s in your PSLE. The truth is, they got 4 A1s and you let them consume this product. And you know what I'm talking about, right? I get very upset to hear of tuition center using their students to advertise their service and causing FOMO, fear of missing out, amongst parents. Recently in Parliament, you hear of Mr. Liang Eng Hua chastising a tuition center that stood outside one of our schools on day one of P1 admission to advertise their service, where it's totally unnecessary and to cause such anxiety amongst the parents. So I have issues with this. Then I have one other point that I'll make. Whenever I meet students and they say they go for tuition, I usually ask this question. Did you ask to go for tuition, or did someone else ask you to go for tuition? Now, there is a big difference. If the child says that I needed help and I want to go for tuition because I aspire to do better, I think it's quite different from someone else telling the child that you need to do this because you need to meet a certain grade. Then we are making the child to try to fulfill our perhaps unfulfilled aspirations. Then I think it's not very fair for the child. When we chase after the same yardsticks that everyone else is chasing, we forget that we lose our child in the process. We no longer, as parents and as educators, try to realize what the child is good at. Instead, we are trying to shoehorn them into someone else's image, and that will do the greatest disservice to education of the child. And this is something I hope we as educators and as parents will bear in mind. Every child is gifted differently. Our job as parents and as educators is to help our children understand their strengths and weaknesses, and in turn, use those strengths to make a contribution to society. Many of you will know that when I visit schools, whether it's primary schools, the P6s, Sec 4s, Sec 5, ITE, Poly, Uni, I always like to end off with one question for every child. And that is, do you know what makes you special? You can score 5 A1s, 10 A1s, but if you cannot tell me what makes you special, then I think we have missed out something in the process. A child, having gone through our system, must know their own respective strengths and weaknesses. That, to me, is more important than anything else. A child scoring 10 A1s and not able to find their own footing is the saddest thing in life. Isn't it so? So when we try to go for tuition, we have to ask ourselves, are we helping our children to realize their strengths and weaknesses, or are we trying to shoehorn them into the image of someone else and to benchmark them to someone else's success? If that is the case, If the latter is the case, then we will never have a diversity of strengths in our society that will help Singapore more vibrant and more resilient, because we will all be measured by the same yardstick. So finally, I would like to really share this with you. You all are going to be MOE teachers. You distinguish yourself from the tuition center teachers because you take care of each and every one. You will be the one like the Statue of Liberty that stands there and say, even if you give me your poor and downtrodden, I will value add to them. I will value add to their lives. We don't just take in the best students and then say that. We don't pre-select the students and say that, oh, we have done our job. No. And on this, you will know that Fred, former principal of RI, used to get rubbed by me. Fred will never come and tell me that, Minister, my student topped the A-level. Because Fred knows that this minister expects nothing less from him, because he has taken in the best students. But I want to know, even if you have taken in the best students, how have you value added to them, not just in terms of their academic learning, but in terms of their character building, in terms of their contributions, so on and so forth. Likewise, many of you may be working in higher needs schools, very challenging environment, but when you see the sense of uplift from a student, from a poorer background, from a broken family, I think the joy that you get in touching their lives is a different order of magnitude from helping the one who scored 4 A's in PSLE to score 10 A's in O-level. It's quite a different joy. And our job as educators is, regardless whether you score 4 A's or how many A's in your PSLE and your O-level, that each and every one that comes through our hands will emerge a better person, more confident of their own abilities. So the tuition industry, I would just say this, I hope the people in the tuition industry really appreciate the true meaning of education. And recently, I believe, was it 8 World has a very good article on what is the true meaning of education and what does tuition really should seek to do, rather than to help those who are already more privileged, or to play on the fears of the parents, and in turn distract everyone from realizing their true potential and being able to answer the question, what makes this child special?
Thank you, Minister. I see a gentleman in the top. Please go ahead and ask your question.
Okay. Hi. Thanks, Minister, for the talk. I have 2 questions. The first question is, given the desire of providing a more holistic education with diverse pathways through the system and the desire to recognize diverse gifts and expressions of success, will we ever consider alternative and authentic assessments becoming a weighted part of the system alongside the traditional national exams in mainstream schools? The second question, since I'm an alumni from Yale NUS, I wanted to just throw this question out there. In your opinion, what role, if any, did the liberal arts education experiment of Yale NUS College play in the trajectory of Singapore's educational landscape? And is there any room in the future for the liberal arts? Thanks.
Okay. First question. First question is a practical and yet a philosophical question. We have 2 bookmarks in our, you can imagine the spectrum of assessment tests and so forth. There are 2 bookmarks. On one hand, we have a narrow standardized test, something like the PSLE. What's the beauty of a narrow standardized test? It's easy to administer. You can't debate very much with it. The standards are fixed. Easy. What's the downside of this? You have many who say that, well, my talent do not fit into your schema necessarily, and you do not appreciate me for my diverse talents. So, for example, if in PSLE we measure math, science, and languages, If you are strong in sports or arts, you won't get measured, right? So standardized tests are easy to administer, but they all have downsides in being narrowed, in being very narrow, and not necessarily able to appreciate the diversity of talents. Then we have the other extreme, whereby we can consider things like aptitude-based admission. Depending on your talent areas, we can admit you accordingly. Now, once you get into that part of the spectrum, then you must accept, and we must accept, that there will be some untidiness in it. Because your yardstick cannot be so precise. So, for example, we have direct school admissions. We have aptitude-based admissions to polytechnics and even universities. When you go through these alternative methods, they will look at things beyond the standardized test, and that's the plus point. But the downside of that is that you will then have many people quarreling about the yardsticks, right? Because many of these will require subjective assessments of a person. So let me give you a very concrete example, using direct school admission, DSA, as an example. We used to have PSLE, standardized tests. We say that it's too narrow, it doesn't encompass everything. We say go for DSA, have different types of sports, different types of CCAs, different qualities that we look for. All well and good, until we come to implementation. How do you assess who gets through the DSA gate? Is it based on current performance, or is it based on future potential? If it's based on current performance, then you might have the hot housing phenomenon coming up. But current performance may not say anything about future performance or potential. If you say that I assess people based on future potential, then won't you agree that we all have to make subjective judgment? If your child is assessed to have future potential, you will agree with the system. But if your child is assessed to not have that high a future potential compared to someone else, but your child is performing better than someone else now, you will have a big issue, right? Convincing the parents. So two children come in front of the assessor. One run faster than the other. Then the coach or the school accept the other one has a better potential, and I will admit the other one. Can you imagine the furore that will be generated by our highly competitive system? This also happened to interviews in polytechnics, admissions to universities. So there's no perfect answer to this, right? And to add to complications, not every bit of talent is measured in quantifiable terms. If you are doing air rifle shooting, maybe you can compare, right? But what if you are in a team sport like soccer and basketball? Or what if you are in a more subjective area like leadership? Then it's very tough, right? So actually, there is no one system that will meet all our needs. Today, we have actually a diversity of systems. But if we truly want to embrace the diversity of systems, to recognize the diversity of talents, then we must have the courage to admit that actually, in this alternative non-standardized test, and by definition, a non-standardized test will involve a certain element of subjective judgment, not just on current performance, but also on future potential. And that is the challenge that all selection systems have to go through. Second question, I'm not very philosophical about different school of thoughts, whether we call it liberal arts or what, non-liberal arts. I don't think that is necessarily the dichotomy that we classify our education system. I have a simpler challenge to all our universities. Our universities take in the very best of every cohort, academically. The question is, what is the yardstick that we should measure them? Is it whether they go liberal arts or not liberal arts is a means to an end. The end state of an education system, especially for our university, are the following. Number one, I challenge all our universities. Are all these very good students that you have taken in, are they able to create new value propositions? Or are they just answering yesterday's questions with yesterday's answer? Perhaps a bit better with ChatGPT. So number one. Number two, are they making new connections, allowing us to see new perspective that we have not done, we have not been able to do so before? You know that today many of the universities are very blessed to have the resources to send their students all overseas, or many of their students all overseas. And many of them keep going to the same place, which bugger me quite a bit. And so I asked them, and Tai Yong will know, that I challenge all of them. For every student that go overseas, you just come back and tell us one thing that we all don't know. It's a high bar, no? To tell us one thing we all don't know. First, you must know what we know, right? Then you must try and tell us something that we all don't know. Because then in Singapore, everyone going out to the world and bring back a new idea, bring back a new perspective, then will enrich us. Now, to me, that is important. To me, whether is it liberal arts or not liberal arts is not the most important. The most important thing is that in today's more fragmented world, more bifurcated world, are we able to bring people together and create new value propositions? Whether you go to Yale, NUS, you go to NTU, you go to NUS, you go to SMU, you go to whichever universities, I want to know whether our students have the ability to create new perspectives, bring people from different backgrounds together to make a contribution to the world. To me, that is more important than anything. And in Singapore, our value proposition is never to be more like other people. We can't be more Chinese than the Chinese, we can't be more Indians than the Indians, we can't be more Americans than the Americans, right? Then what's our value proposition? Our value proposition is having understood the Chinese, the Indians, the Americans, the Arabs, and anyone else in the world that we want to connect with, that we can create something new, right? Surely we can't speak better Chinese than the Chinese in mainland China. We also try not to pretend that we can speak better English than the Westerners, or we can understand them better than they understand themselves. But what we can do is to act as a bridge, as an integrator, where with the infusions of both the East and the West, the North and the South, we are able to come up with our own unique value propositions that allow us to strike out ourselves in the world. So whether it's Yale, NUS, or any other faculty, any other schools in NUS, NTU, SMU, or any other universities in Singapore, I have the same yardstick. Your method of learning is a means to an end. I would like to see different perspectives across all the universities, but I'll challenge them to the same goal. Are you able to create new value propositions, make new connections to help Singapore thrive in a more uncertain world?
Elmie, you teach at the university, right? The minister has just thrown a challenge, problems of tomorrow, solutions for tomorrow. What is your take on this, given that you interact with university students every day?
That's a very tough challenge, Tai Yong. It's more of a, I think the minister's question is very, very relevant, very pertinent. I think at the end of the day, it goes down to the core of success. How do you define success? And success for a student has to be redefined in a way that he or she is able to realize the potential in university education, and then only can make then his or her value proposition to contribute to society. If he or she continues to be judged by the same yardstick, by the same CAP score, by the same major, and how relevant is, or not relevant, how valued is my major, how much money can I get after completing school of computing degree as compared to, for lack of a better word, more fluffy, more washy degrees such as the liberal arts or the arts and social sciences, then if students continue to be evaluated based on that kind of outcomes, right, of the value of a degree based on the major instead of his or her own success notion, right, then I think it will be a challenge. I'll give you an example. This is an example that actually kind of just recently occurred to me personally in a university setting. we had an interview. So we were doing an interview for a residential college admission for a university student. So one of the criteria for a successful admission into that residential college is CAP score, the grade score of a student. So this student was great. She was very much interested in leadership. She wants to be a pioneer in sustainability leadership. She likes to bring her student cohort to go out and bring the residential college students to go out into different countries and different industries to learn more, to apply about climate change, about sustainability. Specifically, she likes animals. She likes those kind of wild animals. So upon reviewing her during the interview, right, so one of the colleagues was that there is a criteria that says that the minimum CAP score should be 3.5, which is out of a CAP score or GPA of 5, for her to be able to continue in this residential college program. And her CAP score was below 3. And I was like, we were like debating, and so these are the, I mean, when it comes all the way down, trickle down, right? It all comes to the point where should then this CAP score then, or this criteria, be a criteria that stops her from pursuing this interest that she needs to be in the college itself in order to pursue what she feels is happy. In my view, I think that makes her happy, that increases her well-being, that makes her love her education, that gives her a sense of ownership in her education, and I think that gives her a yardstick or indicator of success that is not only about money, but it's also about making her happy. And if students are happy, well-being are better. But because of that criteria, right, she is not able to, we have to put her on a KIV basis. So I guess that's back down to the question of, whether majors in universities should be, or certain criteria are linked, very academically based, very points-based system. It should be relooked in universities in that sense. Yeah.
Woon, Chia, do you have anything to add to this?
Not so much to the majors, but I do feel that regardless of your major, there is probably a need to look at competencies that is needed for the future and your definition of success. So my thought is that a lot of time when you sit for university's exam, you end up, answering some questions and on paper. But perhaps if we want to look towards the future, there are things that you may want to consider that's important. For example, a sense of agency. For example, your flexibility or your adaptability in learning. So learning agility is important. I don't think that university's degree or any certification should be the end of what we want for yourself as well as your students. So go beyond that and ask yourself, what is actually the goal of education? It is not a job. It is not just a certification. I think especially teachers to be, you need to ask yourself, because your students would ask you, why do we have to learn? And please don't say that it's to pass the exam or do well and get your A's.
Maybe I should share with you my own story. I'm not your very typical student. When I was in university, I have a strategy. It's to do the maximum number of subjects that just require pass-fail for me to get my grades and move on. So I was doing my undergrad in economics. At that time in Cambridge, we could trace our ancestry to John Maynard Keynes. I was the 4th generation disciples. It was John Maynard Keynes, Joan Robinson, Jeff Harcourt. It was us. We were learning Keynesian economics. That's quite standard fare. We were also taught Marxian economics, the labor theory of value, and applied this to quite sophisticated models, which for the like of me could not figure out why I was learning that. Then I decided that I was very interested in game theory. 1990. Game theory now is quite common in economics faculty, right? At that point of time, it was known as the voodoo economics. It's not for the serious-minded people. I was very interested in behavioral science because it challenged the conventional economics dictum that every actor is rational. But I was very intrigued by behavioral science because it says that maybe not everyone is ultra-rational as the model predicts. Or even if everyone is rational, you may come to some irrational decisions. So that caught my interest. So I told my tutor that I would like to study this. And guess what my tutor told me? Chan, this is not coming up for the exam. I was overjoyed. Yeah, it's not coming out for the exam, so I can do whatever I want. But it says that, it won't come out for the exam because we have no tutors specializing in this and setting the exam. So you can go and do it at your own time if you wish to. And I did it in my own time. I always remember this episode because in life, we have more agency than sometimes we think we have. In today, in our fast-paced world, you talk to the typical student in the undergrad, they will tell you that they are treading water, trying to survive the curriculum. I'm always looking for the student who goes beyond his curriculum and learns something that the teacher never taught him or her, the parents never sent him or her for tuition classes, but he or she just learned because she picked it up on his or her own. And today, with the world in one's hand, the world of information accessible through your smartphone, there's no shortage of learning opportunities. But the question is whether our people will only learn what we tell them to learn, or will our people truly go and pursue something which nobody else may at that point in time be interested in. That adds to the diversity of our learning as a country. So on that note, I would challenge all the NIE graduates to be, they're going to graduate soon, right? Yeah. If they pass their practicum. Okay, if you pass your practicum, you're going to graduate soon, and if in time to come, you walk across the stage and shake my hand to get your certificate, stand by to answer this question. What have you learned that NIE never taught you and is not inside your syllabus? If you don't answer this question, if I am the officiating officer, I may not give you your certificate. Hey, but serious proposition, right? Because if each and every one of you have one skill set or one specialization that others don't have, you have discovered what makes you special, right? And if each of you do that, then won't it be a much better environment, right? You are not monolithic, right? So I have no doubt you will fulfill the NIE curriculum. But actually what I'm most interested and want to challenge you is that beyond the NIE curriculum, and goes back to just now where we started with, right, this lifelong learning. Have you learned something new on your own beyond what is taught? And this worries me because in Singapore, we are a high-performing system. Our students will perform whenever we structure the thing for them to perform. I'm interested if our students will continue to perform on their own when we don't structure everything for them. And this is the essence of whether we will succeed in the next 50 years beyond schools. Our benchmark of success is not how well they do in the first 15 years when they are with us. It's how well they do in the next 50 years when they are no longer with us. Can? Okay, from now until when you graduate, July is it? When you walk across the stage, don't forget this one. If I'm so fortunate to become your officiating officer for your graduation, please walk up the stage confidently and tell me, Minister, this is what I have learned. NIE never taught me.
Can I just add that I will be very proud if you say that this is something that you've learned and NIE hasn't taught you. Because NIE is not striving to teach you everything you need to know. And that is learning agility. Okay, to learn to adapt, to learn when there is no set answer, to learn when things are unknown, to experiment, to have the courage to seek out knowledge on your own.
We call this learning to learn.
So the minister has set for you the final assessment for your time at NIE. Yeah? Okay, I've just been told that we have to wrap up this session. And I want to do so by inviting each of the panelists to share his or her reflections on the discussions we've had today and what the takeaway is and what they'd like to leave you with in terms of what the minister has spoken in his lecture. So I'm going to start from the left and ask Elmie to start maybe just some thoughts about what do you want to leave with the students here or the beginning teachers, and then I'm going to go to Woon Chia, and then maybe the minister will have the last word.
Okay, I'll just, this is a thought. As an educator myself, I think we all have a very, very tough job, if not a role. We need to teach our students, right, be it in the university or any levels, in ways using technologies that we ourselves were not taught as students. We now need to teach them in ways different from our learning. And it's moving so fast that learning agility, learning to learn, is now a very much important aspect of our teaching. So teaching is about learning primarily, especially with technology. So I guess that's a takeaway. How then do we cope with this agility, at the same time maintain our sense of sanity, right? At the same time having to balance the fact that we ourselves need to take care of ourselves as educators and not let this need to not only teach but also learn become a stressor that will then affect our ability to connect, to build relationships with our students. So I guess from a bigger picture, from an educator point of view, this is something that we all need to juggle with, especially with technology. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I think to the teachers-to-be, I do want to highlight to you and hope you will forever remember this. Teaching is a profession. And with that, it means that there are knowledge that you need to know. You must be able to enact your knowledge into practice. Very importantly, governed by professional ethos, but I do want you to develop the judgment to make good decisions in the best interest of your charges. So that is one thing. The second is, don't ever apologize for being a teacher. Okay, do remember that you are not transmitter of knowledge. Because if you see teaching as a job where you transmit knowledge, Google will have done a very good job. You are shapers of character, you facilitate learning, you create and design learning environment, and now you need to know, since you can build nations, you are agents of both educational and societal change. So don't underestimate the impact you will have.
Okay, I have 3 final thoughts to share with you. First, all of you in your onward journey as teachers and perhaps as Singaporeans in different walks of life must always understand this tension. On one side is where we have come from and what has worked. Keep to those fundamentals, but yet on the other side, have a bit of divine dissatisfaction with the current status quo and keep asking ourselves how we can do better in context. And be prepared to make those changes at the right time. I say it's a tension because it's not for us to cling on to what has worked and think that it will always work. Neither is it for us to throw away everything that has worked and think that we can start afresh. Life is always a tension between these two sets of forces. Understanding the fundamentals that have served us well, hold on to them, and yet at the same time, have that desire to keep improving the system and telling yourself that you can do it. That's the first thing. The second thing is that all of you have been given a jotter books today. If you flip the book, I have left many pages empty for you. But there is one page I want you to flip to. After all the history, I want you to open the book and write the next chapter to take us to SG100. I hope you will keep this book with you. You will be inspired by the generations that have come before you to build the system we have today. Give thanks for what we have, but make a commitment that you will fill in at least that page, if not the rest of the pages, to bring us to SG100. And I'm not joking. All of you are around 20 years old. In 40 years' time, you will take on the leadership of this country, if not earlier. And you have every right and responsibility to take Singapore and Singaporeans to SG100 and beyond. And that is my fervent hope that you understand this role of yours. Last but not least, I just want you to take care of yourself and take care of each other. There is no challenge that we as a fraternity cannot overcome. There is no difficulty too big for us to overcome as a fraternity. But if each and every one of us only take care of ourselves and not work as a team, then there will be no challenge that is so small and yet we cannot overcome. We are here because of the hard work of the pioneer generations who have built this for us. We are here because since 1965, we have committed to building one unified teaching fraternity. I have not seen another country that has the kind of system and porosity and unity within the fraternity. In other systems, the administrators, the policy makers will point the finger at the executor and say that you didn't do a good job. The executor on the ground will say that you don't know what your policies you are. And some people will say that I stay in this school, I don't care about the rest because that's not my problem. In Singapore, every challenge is our challenge. And there is no challenge that we cannot overcome so long as we stay as one united fraternity. My promise to you is that the leadership in MOE, the leadership in the cabinet, we will commit ourselves to give our best to support you in your profession. All we ask for is that you keep inspiring the next generation to help Singapore and Singaporeans defy the odds of history so that the last 60 years will not just be an aberration in our history where we are independent and free, that we will be able to continue this dream of ours to be for Singaporeans forevermore. That unlike my mother who has to sing 4 national anthems in her lifetime, I hope your generations and the generations that come after will never have to sing another national anthem. Thank you very much.
So before I end, deadline for the submission of the last chapter is, anyway, please join me in thanking Minister for a very inspiring lecture and for our panelists for sharing their insights. And thank you all for coming today and giving us your questions as well. Thank you all very much.